All right, welcome to episode 20 of the You Understood podcast. I am delighted to welcome our guest, Harrison Brown. I always like to ask the guests to introduce themselves, and I'm always fascinated to see how they do it because the introductions kind of half define who you think you are. No pressure.
No pressure.
Go for it.
Okay, so I'm Harrison. I'm 32 and I'm a returning student. So I study electrical and electronic engineering at Napier in Edinburgh. And that defines who I am at the moment.
It's a journey, right? It's a journey. So I never had you down as 32, first of all. I thought you were a lot younger, so that's a credit to you.
Yeah, I had to work it out on my fingers and toes this morning. Yeah.
So tell us a bit about the journey so far. Before we started the podcast, we got into a small conversation about your journey around Scotland. But What about before that? So where were you born and how did you, what environment did you grow up on before you kind of ended up in Scotland?
So my family home for me is halfway between Aberdeen and Dundee, a wee village there. And that's where I'm from. That's where I grew up. And it was always a case of if everyone's like, "Oh, where are you from?" I'm from Aberdeen.
Okay.
And then as I was growing up, I had no idea what I was going to do.
Uh-huh.
No idea at all. Finished school, leaning towards kind of physics, maths, maybe engineering. Then I wasn't so sure. Went and got my eyes tested one day and thought, I could do that. So off I went to uni, went to Glasgow Cali, got a lower second class degree in optometry. So that's a story in its own because my dad actually passed away in 2013.
Okay.
So that affected my exams, etc.
Yeah.
And then I was told my resits would be graded and they weren't. So I would have been a 2-1, but it's fine. I was already working with a small multiple at the time, so it wasn't too much of an issue, didn't really push it. And I just moved into working as an optician as we started off on what's called the pre-reg, which is like a year's worth of training where you work underneath someone else.
Yep.
That didn't go particularly well.
Is that just your experience of it? Or
yeah, just my experience.
Not what you thought it was going to be? Or
well, the degree was fine because I've realised now that I like solving things and puzzles and that kind of idea. And optometry was like that. It was all like trying to figure out someone's prescription, trying to, spot the wee hidden thing that's there. Because everyone who comes in, there could be anything. You could see anything. So you've always got to be vigilant for what you're looking for. But in the same way as well, optometry has advanced quite far, especially here in Scotland. There's lots of things they can do. It's all part of the NHS. So at the same time, the accountability is crazy. Hats off to anyone who's still working as an optician, honestly. It was not for me. I realised I just wasn't meant to be in healthcare. So that all ended. I left before what was called the OSCEs, which is like your final exams, where you then go off on your own and get your own insurance and things like that. Yeah. And that's when everything all kind of fell apart. So I kind of just fell in on myself at that point.
Okay. Was that crisis of kind of identity or confidence or a mixture of those things?
A mixture of everything, really. Yeah. It was a mixture of everything, really. I wasn't doing particularly well as an optician. Everything I did was super hard just to do. So then I had no idea what I was going to do. I'm supported by my mum. I've always been supported by my mum all the way through. Nice. She's been fantastic. Yeah. Wouldn't be where I am now without her. And eventually I managed to somehow pick myself up and think, what am I going to do?
How long, so, do you mind me asking how long that kind of period was? Was it like a month or two, or did it kind of go on beyond that?
I think it was a couple of years.
Oh, was it really? Goodness.
Yeah, it was.
Just kind of lost.
It's very difficult to find the time because it's all just kind of disappeared, really. Wondering where the heck the last 10, 12 years have disappeared to be honest.
But you emerged.
So yeah, I emerged from it somehow, picked myself up slowly, and from there it was I got small jobs here and there. I worked in an accountancy place with my brother's partner.
Yeah.
And so I realised that's not what I want to do either. So at the time I was thinking, well, I want something structured. I want something where I'm going to be able to do something great. And I thought, well, what's wrong with the RAF?
Okay.
So I suppose that's the first time I realised that I just ploughed into that 100%. Absolute 100%. Got a personal trainer, did nothing but work out, get my fitness up and get myself mentally good. And then I was rejected for health because of being heavily lactose intolerant.
Oh, okay.
So it's a case of lactose is quite a common sugar in MREs, things like that.
Yeah.
But basically, I was told that no, because of the stomach issues that may arise, no, sorry. And I was like, okay. I could have fought it. Maybe I could have done other things. But at the time, again, I was just like, everything's falling apart again. So I went to work for Domino's as a driver.
You got to do what you got to do, right?
Do what I can do. In about 6 weeks, I was running the shifts, and then after a while, I was managing the store.
Nice.
That was a horrible, horrible place. Treated people like animals. It was really not nice. That was all pretty much minimum wage all the way through. Ran the store, everything, and in the end, they were like, "Oh no, that money that we said that you're, due, etc. No, you're not getting it, etc." And I was like, "Fine." So. I eventually managed to get working at a shop doing computer repair, IT repair.
Okay.
I've always been passionate about computers, that kind of thing. And I started working there. It all seemed fine. Turns out that my boss was a raging alcoholic, and it was a bit of a toxic place to work with. In the end, I couldn't stay. I'd had enough. So that ended after about a year. I thought to myself, well, what am I going to do now? Everything I've done is falling apart. Everything is disappearing. What am I going to do?
And that adds to the narrative, I'm sure, in your own head around, everything I try is not going to work, right?
Exactly. The confidence is just getting
lower
eroded.
Lower.
It's not getting lower and lower. It's just it's there, but it's just getting more and more fragile.
Yes.
And then I thought, well, I could do this myself. I could do a lot of things better than they can, and so I learned to be a micro solderer, where you solder things under a microscope.
Right, okay.
But we did some courses for that. Tried to start a business in that. I was trying to get going with that, and that's when I realised that I would have to move somewhere else because of the area I was in. I was told I would be blacklisted basically if I tried to do any work.
Because of the competition.
Yeah, because of the competition and the person I used to work with.
Right, okay.
He told me to my face that if you come in competition with me, I will ruin you.
Wow.
I was like...
Sounds like a nice guy.
Great. Yeah, fantastic. So at that point I was like, what am I going to do now? Yeah. I don't have the money behind me to move out and start a business somewhere else. What am I going to do? And COVID happened. So I thought, what am I going to do? So I just looked around for jobs. I managed to find a job working night shift up in Edinburgh at the Tesco there. And one of my longtime good friends, Rhett, said, well, come live with me. Because he lived up there. So I moved up there. He was also trying to get me a job at the place he worked as well.
Yeah. Sometimes you really
good
need
money.
those helping hands, right?
And he was a big helping hand
on
my life. We don't speak as much as we should now, but he's my bestest friend.
Nice.
So, emotions, right? So I lived with him for a while.
Yeah.
And didn't manage to get in with his company.
Okay.
I was on the short list, but they cut it even shorter because of COVID, so I didn't get in.
Yep.
I was number 7 and they took on 6.
Oh.
I was 7th on the list, apparently. So, again, I'm like, great, no one wants me. So, what am I going to do? Well, I went and started doing electrical and electronic engineering as a HND at college. I thought, let's just do that. So, that's what I did through then. I've been living with Rhett long enough. It was a case of, right, I've got to move out now. It was just to get me back on my feet.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So moved into flat mode in Aberdeen, did my HND, was working night shift for 4 or 5 nights a week almost, and doing college at the same time. So again, there's this, I'm going all in doing this one thing.
Yep.
And that ended. Tried to get some jobs with HND. Nothing really panned out either. Had a couple of interviews. Some of them were just trivial. One of them seemed like it might go somewhere and then just didn't. And I thought, well, what am I going to do now? Well, I seem to have done really well in the college. Let's go back to uni.
So is that in fact, just pause there for a second, right? We'll come on to uni.
Long journey.
a long journey. And I think, the biggest message today, we wanted to touch on resilience, right? But
yes.
2 things you've talked about, I've just got to come in on. First of all, big shout out to Tesco, because I think Tesco rescues a lot of people at certain times in their life. And, I've had multiple experiences myself. I've lots of people I've met have done shifts in Tesco when times have got hard. So I think there's a real key underlying message there. But secondly, fun optometrist story. First of all, right?
Fun one.
I'll give you one. Right?
Okay.
So I before the contact lenses became those throwable, disposable ones, they were gas permeable ones,
Yep.
right? So they were hard lenses, and I think I was about 12 when I first had them. Put them in my eye, and by accident, like 3 or 4 months into that journey, I'd gone asleep and left them in there, right? So woke up, bloody hell, contact lenses in my eyes, but actually got to go to school. I won't bother cleaning them. Off I go. And because there was no consequence to that, I thought, this is brilliant, right? This is brilliant. I can just have these in my eyes for a while. Anyway, long story short, you probably know where I'm going with this. I ended up going for a checkup, probably about 9-12 months into that journey. And I took them out occasionally, every 3 or 4 days when it's supposed to be every day. But the point was, all of my vessels in my eyes had started to kind of reach out like the roots of a tree to get some oxygen because they were getting starved of oxygen. So if I hadn't gone for that checkup, I'd have been in very, very big trouble. So they took them away from me, and I wasn't allowed contact lenses for a long, long time. But I managed to persuade them 3 or 4 years later when I started playing football again. But yeah, fun optometrist story there for sure.
Yeah, you got a bit of a slap on the wrist there.
A very big slap on the wrist, but I needed it. Is my point. I needed it because I thought I knew it all and I was clever and there was no consequences. So there's probably a story in life there as well. So universities then,
yes,
safe place, or colleges, higher education, safe place. You feel at home there, and why engineering? Like, is that the methodical brain that you have and the wanting to kind of solve things? Is that what led you down that path?
I think so, yeah. So when I was younger, I didn't, my dad always worked extremely hard at his job. He was all in as well. I'm realizing now I've picked that up. But he was all in to the exclusion of a lot of other things. Yeah. And I saw it literally killing him. So his health was going down, and then it came back up again, and it went down a bit, and I could see that, and I thought, I don't want this. So I immediately closed that door to me in my brain. That was it.
Okay. And
it's not until after, when I've grown up, I've realised that I don't have to be that. So I'm not. But he's always said to me that I'm always a fiddly engineer.
Okay.
I like to fiddle with small things.
Yeah.
And he's kind of right, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I think I am a very kind of methodical, kind of puzzle-solving kind of person, and that sits well with me.
So finding work in those sectors. Yeah, absolutely, exactly.
They don't.
Do you want to touch on the because we know each other from the student union thing. Do you want to touch on the FSTN stuff that you're doing? Because I love that stuff. I find it really fascinating. And you've got a pivotal role there now, right? Coming into next year.
Yeah. So a pivotal role now and a pivotal one next year as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, we'll see. So when I went to uni, I was looking for, because I'm a bit older, I realised that, not to say I'm wrong or right, but I was looking for the extra thing that would set me apart.
Okay. Yep.
Because I've always thought that because I'm older, going back to university, that employers will always think, yeah, but why didn't you get it right first time, and why now, or maybe you won't stay, or maybe we'll pick someone younger because we can have them for longer, that kind of idea. So I've always thought, well, I need that extra thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I found the new Formula student team that was starting up there, and I just jumped in.
Nice.
And I seem to have marketed myself quite well, and seem to have thought reasonably well of me at the time. So I came in as electrical lead, and I worked quite closely with the chief engineer at the time, Roberto. He was pretty much the person running the technical side of it, building this car. We didn't manage to finish the car. There was lots of problems with it. He wanted to do things different ways than the competition really needed.
But so, for the listeners, like to explain it, it's basically you've got to design, build, test, race, everything. You're literally from the ground up. You're building this racing car, right?
Yeah. So essentially, what we do is we build a Formula style vehicle with the intent of racing it at Silverstone every year. So Formula Student is the biggest student engineering competition in the world.
How many students roughly?
Let's see, there's 120 universities applied for Silverstone last year, or something around that.
Whoa.
It's quite a lot. Formula Student UK has been going for 25 years last year.
Well established then, yeah.
Yes, we're not. Going down to Silverstone was our first attempt last year. And we're going up against teams in Glasgow, Edinburgh, all these other big universities that have been going for almost 20 years.
Cool.
So, but we'll come to that, because it's a case of you've got to know what it is you're trying to do.
Yeah.
You don't compete for first place.
Yep.
Don't try to do that. Try to set your own goals.
Yeah. What is
and go from there.
It's the cheesy line, right? What does good look like this year? What does good look like next year? Right? Yeah.
Exactly. So that's what we're trying to do. And so I went from electrical lead into chief engineer the following year. I'm an electrical student. I'm not a mechanical student, I hit the books.
Yeah, okay.
Again, I'm just going into it straight 100%. And we're now producing a car over 2 years with help of the university, and hopefully we're going to take our designs down this year and we'll race it next year.
Nice.
So that's the plan.
And I've seen the new design. It looks really quite sleek versus the first iteration that I saw. Don't know how many iterations in you are. But just speaking about kind of student life generally, for those either too old to remember or those not lucky enough to go, just get, and you're going to have a different slant on this, right? Because what is it like now, and has it changed? Because you were lucky to go kind of pre-COVID, and then now you've got experience post-COVID. Yeah. Are there any marked differences, or actually is it essentially the same? And then we'll come on to the environment around kind of student life.
I would say that it's still the same, really.
Okay.
Being at Glasgow Cali and being at Napier, it's a very similar kind of environment, really. It's very different courses, but it's a very similar kind of environment, I think.
Okay.
I guess if you went to university during COVID, it'd be very different. And I know that student association is really trying to build up this sense of self at Napier, because that's what I think that COVID lost a lot of that. Everyone lost touch, and there was less of a joint sense of self because of that. And they've done an absolutely fantastic job bringing it back, especially Giu this year, who you've met from the Student Association. Yeah. It's quite a character, and I wish him well. So
the first time I met him, I think the first line was, "Hi, I'm Giu. I'm actually a clown."
Yes,
and he actually is a clown, right? So I didn't know how to take that at first, but then he explained it. But fascinating the way he brought laughter and entertainment into actually quite serious topics, but gelled it in a really empathetic way. Big shout out there.
Someone else you should get in touch with.
Absolutely. I think so. And the environment itself as a student, like, does it depend on the subject matter? You know, is it the environment of the university? Is it the people that are your cohort or your fellow students? I mean, what are the main levers to either a good environment or a more challenging environment as a student? So is it the pressure of work? Is it the lecturers? Is it your fellow students? Or is it just a combination of all those? But are there ones that are specific? If you're away from a hometown, is that a big indicator? In terms of, and I'm thinking about well-being generally here of all students, just talk to us about kind of some of the levers you've seen that have either a positive or a negative impact on perhaps yourself, but also others.
So it depends very much on the type of university you go to, because there are different types, and the type of student you are, and how you approach life. So for me, I'm approaching it with the ticking clock in mind, which is how I feel it. That's personally how I feel. Definitely. It's ticking down. And I chose Napier because they were interested in teaching me. It's not a case of come to this university because we have all this history and we have, well, Napier does have a lot of history, but it's not a case of we have all of these publishing credits and all of this applause and all this kind of stuff. Which is what you would get if you went to, say, Edinburgh, for example, or Glasgow Uni here, for example.
So personality of the university is important.
Yeah, it's going to match who you are as a student. And you would go to, say, some of the European universities if you were, genius and trying to, I guess, no life it, I guess, is what you would call it. That's the kind of environments that they aim themselves for. And then for myself, when it came to Napier, I just talked to the lecturers. Just went to the open days, chatted to them. That's really good advice. Go to the open days, just chat to people. And see what they're like, even not in your own subject. I spent a lot of time talking to Andrew Livingston, who was part of the School of the Built Environment. All that kind of thing. And from him, I just got a lot of a case of they just want to teach you.
Because you'll find that obviously individuals have different experiences, backgrounds, and different personalities. But when you actually talk to a lot of different individuals within the same group, even though there's differences and sometimes quite marked differences, actually you can sense the culture there. If that makes sense. You might get kind of tidbits here and tidbits there, but essentially you can sense a kind of a golden thread through it all. So that's what you're talking about, is sensing that from different people to build up a picture of whether this university, this academic institution is right for you.
It's a difference between I went here and I am this.
Got it.
That's how I saw it. I'm sure there's a spectrum in between, and it depends upon your courses, all that kind of thing. But that's what I found.
Okay.
That's genuinely what I found. And when it comes to a lot of the students as well, it comes to how you are. Are you going there for just your degree because your degree is what you do to eventually make money and you're about something else? Or is it that your degree is your life?
Got it.
It depends what kind of a student you are and what you want to do.
And whether you want to kind of network and socialize and all of that stuff. And is that less important for an older student? Or is it still integral to the whole?
It's just as important. We're still the same people, no matter what age we are. We still need to spend time with other people. It's still important to network, because a lot of the time it's about who you know rather than what you know.
And I think that carries on outside of the academic life as well.
There's a lot of that goes on.
Okay, good. And what about kind of times of the year in an academic year? Do you sense, and have you felt different kind of on the x-axis? Have you felt kind of different impacts, either positive or negative again, of different times of the year? So, does freshers feel like something and then the holidays feel like something else, and then exam time or submission of work, or, are you conscious of those, or actually are you just in those when they happen? So you're not kind of foreseeing them and preparing yourself for the impact. You just kind of go along and deal with them when they come.
So, yes. It's the broad answer to that question. So student life it's both great and stressful at the same time. Again, it depends how you deal with it. But unless you're absolute genius, then it is stressful, because it's meant to be hard. You're meant to learn. You're meant to I mean, if it was that easy, everyone would be doing it. It wouldn't have value. So it can be quite hard. At the beginning of the year, you think, oh, I've got all the time. And then you'll look ahead at what's for you on your modules, and you'll think, oh, that's hard. Okay, fine. Well, it's not hard right now, so I'll deal with that when I get to it, right?
Yeah.
And then you get to it, and you're like, absolutely crazy. Yeah. And then eventually you manage it, and you hand it in. Whether you hand in your work or you do your exam, whether you feel like you could have done more or not.
But is that a big sense of relief at that point, or is it actually anxiousness?
So this is where I think I'm probably different from a lot of other people.
Okay.
So we're getting to the meat of it, I guess.
Yes.
Is that I am constantly anxious about every deadline. Doesn't matter how far away it is, it feels to me as important as if it was next week.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, once the deadlines are over, I have this feeling of almost like shock and almost like a loss of direction. And then I'm looking for the next one.
Next deadline?
The next deadline. The next deadline is going to be there. What's the next thing I'm doing? Because if I'm not doing something or working towards something, who and what am I?
So is that are you looking in a way then? Are you looking for a sense of purpose, a sense of definition of yourself in those deadlines? And I haven't forgotten about the all-in thing either. Mm-hmm. But is that so? When there's no deadline, it's like, oh, hold on a minute,
I should have one.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what it feels like, because I'm constantly trying to make myself better, make something more of myself.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I have this feeling that I'm not good enough.
Okay.
I'm never good enough, because if I was good enough, then things would have worked out before, right? But they haven't. And it's that constant maybe erosion of what's happened has left me with this kind of feeling of I need to make something, but at the same time, the wee voice in the back of your head says, but it won't. It's never worked that way before.
So you're in this case then, and I'm just going to replay it to you, but in this case, it sounds like you're using largely the negative outcomes of lived experience, a real experience that you've had, to forward suggest where your current efforts and challenges are going to be.
Yeah, pretty much. And I'm dealing with that in my own time. I've not really gone to counselling. I've not really sought help in any meaningful way. When things were quite bad, I did go and see someone, but nothing really happened. I was given some antidepressants, and that was about it. They didn't really know what to do with me. I was actually told by the person treating me, I'm not quite sure what to do with you.
It doesn't sound helpful.
It wasn't helpful. It really wasn't helpful. And eventually I clawed myself back to it. And it was a lot of introspection, and very slowly over the pace of a very long time.
Yeah.
And I'm at the point now where I'm aware of this is who I am right now.
Yeah.
I find, the difficult thing is that I find it hard to take joy in things anymore.
Okay.
The joy will be there on the surface, but it's never any further than that.
As in, you're not getting that sense of satisfaction.
No.
And can we just, so you're saying joy. Mm-hmm. Do you differentiate between joy and satisfaction?
Yes. So satisfaction for me would be completing a deadline and going, right, it's done.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
There's also that, it could have been better, could have done this, could have done that, etc. But the satisfaction is there.
Yeah.
If I, brush all the rest of it away and look, it is there. But it's never fully fulfilling.
Okay.
Maybe it's because I'm not at that point where I feel like I've done enough yet.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. And that's where I think I am. in things at the moment.
So I'm just going to go in a segue for a second, because I'm fascinated by this, and I'm sure the listeners will be curious as well, right? So if I'm trying to draw parallels from my own experience, which is all I've got to draw upon, right? Yeah. So when I was, living the kind of corporate lifestyle, then for me that was a bubble, right? And like you, I think I threw everything at that. And that was to the detriment of other areas of my life, because you can't have 100% in any direction without a dilution somewhere else, right? I mean, that's logical, right? Everyone knows that. But when you're in it and you're doing it, I don't think you're conscious of it, okay? So that for me was a bubble. I was doing it all the time. And the point I want to make is metrics in that bubble are almost, and they're not quite, but they're almost singular by nature. So if you think about the corporate world as an example, that would be kind of growth, it would be revenue, it would be margin, it would be EBITDA, it would be, quality of service, feedback from customers, all the usual stuff. But the point is it's singular in the way it's defining you as a person, right? Yeah. So now go to kind of the academic world, and success and definition of anyone in that world is, accolades, certificates, grades, that is singular by nature, and it defines who you are. But you can do that anywhere, right? So my point is, actors will define themselves in a certain way. Sports people, they'll be chasing PBs all the time, or medals, but they're all singular in those metrics, are all very singular. And what they all have in common is that they leave everything else that makes a human, which is all the other stuff. Yeah. When you're in any one of those bubbles, and there are a countless number of bubbles, they ignore all the other stuff that is a part of us, right? So what I'm curious about, and I think some of our listeners will be curious about, is, are you able to think about consciously, or do you have to try really hard to measure success in other ways outside of that bubble? So, physical health, or, friendships and relationships, or, getting out and climbing a Monroe somewhere, or going to the woods or the beach and having a barbecue, or are you able to consciously think like that? Or because you're 100% in, this is all that matters, because you've got to be 100%. Does that make any sense or not?
Yeah, it does. So I could be 100% all in on everything, but I have two extremely good checks on my life. They're called Phil and Martin. And they keep me right. They do a lot of that. So they're my two best friends at the moment.
Yep.
Talk to them every day.
Yep.
And just over Discord, I met Phil for the first time in person not that long ago, actually.
Oh, so how long had you been communicating with him?
We've been communicating with each other for so I've knew of Martin, or Hardy as we call him, since I was at my first degree in Cali.
My goodness.
That's probably close on about 14 years or so, maybe. And I knew about Phil for quite a while, but then we never really sat and spoke and whatever until... I think it's maybe 4 years. It's very difficult for me to say. I'd have to actually get a calendar and try and go back and work it out.
It's years. It's not months. It's years.
It's years. Yeah. So and I mean they keep an eye on things, because it's a good idea to have those friends. I'm very very happy to have those kind of friends. Yeah. We keep an eye on each other.
And this is a support network, right? Yes. This is a kind of personal ecosystem for you.
Yeah.
And it works well.
It does work well, yeah. I'm not very good at keeping in touch with people. Rhett, who is the friend that supported me most across my whole life, we're not very good at keeping in touch. But no matter what, he's like family to me.
Yeah, and that's a good sign of a relationship.
And even my brother, go months, but we're still brothers.
Yeah.
But with Phil and Hardy, it's a case of they're like my daily check, almost.
Yeah.
It's a case of they're the ones who turn around and go, "Where you been?" But for myself, I've realized, because, well, your change starts with you.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a case of I have done my hardest, and I've done a lot of retrospection, thinking that I have to take a step back from what I do and think, well, I think it might be a common thing, but other people's problems always seem easier to solve than your own.
Yeah, always.
Always.
Yeah, always.
So what if you take a step back and think of yourself as someone else?
Someone else. I love that. Yep.
And you think, well, if I was someone else looking at me, what would I say? Because it's sometimes difficult to say what's best for others because you don't know the whole story. But for you, you do.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like dealing with someone else's problem, but except you know all the facts.
Yeah.
They might be coloured by your own perceptions.
Yes, yeah.
That's
and you can be your harshest critic as well, can't you?
Oh, I'm my own harshest critic.
That's the challenge
idea.
as well. Yeah.
And so you got to step back and think, well, what would I say? What would I do? Sometimes it's just a case of looking at it and going, you just need to get that done. Just do it. And that's a lot of what I tell myself. Because if I step back and look at myself, I can say, well, you are capable of this. You can do this. Or sometimes I look and I go, don't do that. What are you doing?
I do that a lot.
You'll take a step back, you look at yourself and you go, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You know you shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
Or you know that's not a good idea. Why are you doing that? So you've got to step and go, right, okay, fine, I'm not going to do that then. And that's how I keep a check on myself. And that's how I try to keep myself right with what I do, or as well as in your own head. For me, it's a case of we're never fully in control. There's the subconscious you. There's the things that you do that you wonder, why did I do that?
Yeah.
And you've got to, for me, I've been able to recognize this, that I'm not fully in control. We're not. A lot of what we do is out of our control.
Yeah,
We're on like, because in one of your previous podcasts, a lot of what we do is on autopilot.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was listening to that yesterday, actually.
Yeah.
And you've got to understand that it's still you.
Yeah.
And you've got to understand that when you look back on things, you might go, oh, I should have done things differently otherwise, but it's not a different person. It's still you.
Absolutely.
So I can keep a check on myself like that. I can try and steer myself in the right direction. And that's easy to do when you've done something, you're looking back on it. Yeah, now you've got to be present in the moment.
Much more difficult, yeah.
And that's where the things that are out of your control start to factor in. So I am anxious about everything.
Even outside the academic stuff?
Yes.
And how does it, like, just describe that? How does it manifest itself in you? Do you get agitated? Do you that anxiousness, does that present itself as kind of just high stress? Like, how do you feel anxious?
It appears in a range of different ways.
Okay.
Because I'm aware of it and I'm dealing with it, and I'm well into my journey with dealing with it, it's very spread out. Some of it I can deal with.
Yeah.
Some of it I can isolate and realize and get over. Some of it I just have to realize I can't get over this right now. So I need to think to myself, right, this is a problem. So deal with it. Do what you can. Recognize the things that are in your control and out of your control. And I don't do the best with keeping myself... Well, I take on a lot.
Right, yeah, okay.
Chief engineer, former student, next year's team principal. I'm still taking all this on. I've got next year's, I've got my honours to do next year as well, all this kind of stuff. And I also have a propensity to micromanage a bit, and I'm aware of that, and I try and not.
Is that a control thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
it definitely is.
It's 100% a control thing. It's not because I want to control others.
Yeah.
It's because I feel like if I can't control the things that are within my life, then they're out of control.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not just things will happen.
Yeah.
Things happening have a sense of out of controlness on my life.
Yeah.
And again, it comes down to the deadlines always feeling like they're immediate, no matter how far away they are. So that all factors in.
And I guess the brilliant thing about doing this podcast is, you're into that journey, right? Yeah. You've been feeling that way for a while. You've been figuring it out. You've been testing what does work, what doesn't work for you, because everyone's going to be different.
For me, everyone's different.
But it would, I'm sure that some of the advice that you could give in your own experiences would be super helpful for others that feel anxious and are maybe looking for different ways just to cope, right? It doesn't mean you have to fix everything, because I don't think that's possible, but to alleviate some of the stress and anxiousness.
Yeah.
What works for you, what doesn't?
Well, step one is fake it till you make it.
Okay.
That's step one. I'm very good at lying to myself. I'm very good at lying to myself, and I've realized that. So I trick myself into doing things until the trick is now just what you do, and then you're no longer tricking yourself. It's just now something you do.
Yeah.
So it's for example, I will tell myself I can do that, even though everything says no, I can't.
Yeah.
And I'll go, I can do it. Well, just act like you can then. Just go and do. And so, for example, the other day I was sitting learning how to code something, and I was thinking, I can't do this. And I thought, well, let's just go and pretend you can. And I'm sitting there on YouTube watching lectures from ETH University on how to code this and that and the other. And I got to the end of the lecture, I thought, I can do that. And I've tricked myself into saying, well, I'm just going to pretend I'm one of these people, and then before I know it, I realize actually maybe I could. So, well, it was about midnight at that point. I was all right, well, I've got to go to bed. But the next day, picked up the next lecture, picked up the next one. And before I know it, I can do this. So I can trick myself into saying I can do this.
And this is about
just
making the
myself,
start, is it?
Yeah.
Making the start. But once you get into it, you're clearly a very capable guy. So you know from experience that you start that journey, trick or not, but that gets you started on the journey, and then you find that actually, hold on, I can do this, right? So there must be confidence building coming from that over time as well, though.
It does build a little bit of confidence. That's true. But at the same time, I need to be careful that because I've tricked myself before, there's, if someone tricks you before,
you're on the watch out for it
anymore,
absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
So I have to be careful that I still trust myself.
Yeah.
So it's something you can do, but I don't think it's something you can live by.
Got it.
And that's how I started. And then getting these little small building bricks to say, I can do this, I can do that. And then there comes the failure, which will happen eventually.
Yep.
No matter what you do, there will be failures.
Embrace the failure.
Yes. Well, less embrace the failure, more just own it and learn from it. If you don't take ownership of your own failures, then you find ways to say that they're not yours.
So that's accountability, right?
When you don't learn and take ownership from your failures, then you've 100% failed, 110% failed. If you can't learn from something and it's all bad and it's all gone, well, that's not a great feeling. It doesn't help.
Yeah.
It would make things even worse for me. And again, it's about taking that step back and looking and going, if this was someone else who's failed, what would you say?
Yeah.
You would say, I will learn from your failure. There's got to be something positive about it.
Yeah.
So you look at yourself and you go, well, what was then?
So you analyze it then, right?
And at the worst, it's a case of, well, you know not to do that again.
Yeah, but it's still a learning.
At the very worst.
Yeah.
But then you realize from that, well, that's not what I want to do.
Yeah.
Or maybe why it didn't work that way.
And I've got to just on that point specifically, I had a previous podcast with Josh Quigley, and often I sit in front of people and we talk about failure, and usually it's kind of, I gave that, or I tried that, I gave that a go, or I tried that, and it didn't work, right? So I thought I'll change this about it and I'll approach it in a different way, and then I'll go back and do it again, right? Those kind of attempts at something usually last 2 to 3 times. If the outcome at that point, I'm talking generically now, is still perceived by the individual as a negative output, they'll stop. This guy, I sat in front of this guy, and he talked about getting on this bloody ferry, right? Time and time again. I think, I can't remember how many times, but it was literally like, bloody hell, I would have stopped long ago.
Yeah,
and this guy just
went
kept reversing, going back, reversing, going back. And there's something in that as well. There's something in saying, just keep going, right? It's almost like brute force on it.
Yeah.
So again, it's a very personal thing, but I raise it because actually, if you just keep trying something, eventually there's a breakthrough. It's the law of averages, right?
But it's got to be the thing that you want to do,
100%,
or that you know you need to do.
Absolutely.
So you need to understand that.
Yeah,
I definitely think. With Josh, it was the case of he built himself up to this. This is what he knew he needed and wanted to do, but at the time, it just wasn't the right time for him to do that.
Spot on.
And there was still a lot of things that he was doing at the time. But for a lot of other people, things crash and fail and disappear. For him, it was he could try again and try again. But when you lose your job, or you fail your course, and you've got if you're good, you can start again. You will find that door is closed. At that point, that's where a lot of people will have that point where that's where things fall apart. And that's where it fell apart for me.
Do you think there's something in there, though, about the perception of the individual on what finality looks like? So as an example, you get people who are stuck in jobs and they feel like they can't leave that job because they're paid well, or they'll never get a job like that again, so close to home, or or it's in a sector that they absolutely love, but it's just a toxic environment, so they feel trapped. Same similarity in kind of relationships. So there's this perception of, if this goes, I don't know how I'm going to cope. So you build that picture in your mind that says, like to your point, and it's gone, it disappears. And I would agree, I think I've learned over the years that my perception of finality in the way I now perceive it was incorrect, right? This is just my self-assessment. So all of those things where I thought I can't reverse back out of this now because I've gone too far, or I'm up against the clock, or it's it's a specific deadline. I think I was actually being too short-sighted on it, because the reality is, no matter what, and I'm being general, I know there are nuances here, but if you're in a relationship and then you leave it, it's not the end. If you're in a job and then you leave it, it's not the end. If you leave your course and stop education, it's not the end, or it doesn't have to be in all those cases, right? But I think you can build up a picture that absolutely says, this is my one shot, and if I blow it, I'm screwed, right? And that's also, so it doesn't change the situation, it changes how you view it.
So there is something in there where sometimes if you do blow it, it is your last shot. And that's the way things are set up. So not all of us have the same amount of money behind us. Not all of us have the same opportunities as other people have. Some people have more opportunities from others because they have those connections, things like that as well. There's a lot to it, but when it comes to failure, I think a lot about failure, because that's what the back of my mind does all the time. And it's scary, but at the same time, it's done it that much it's kind of numbing after a while. I will pick up on things when new ways to fail will appear out of nowhere, and they always do, and that's almost paralyzing. But it's getting over that I've found. Eventually, I've found my ways of doing it by stepping back, by looking at myself, trying to take a little bit of faith in myself. I'm losing track of where I'm going now, but it's a case of this failure. Sometimes it is that, sometimes it is final, but it's only final at that point.
Yes, exactly.
After you lose your job or whatever,
yeah,
you know, curtains don't come down. That's the end.
Yeah,
you don't. You've got all these other years ahead of you.
Spot on.
And you've got to think to yourself, well, if I fail where I am, and I've got to go back to stacking shelves at Tesco again, or going and working in a coffee shop or whatever, well, that's where you are right then. But you still have the potential of yourself
to do anything.
You still have your own potential
at any time.
At the point before the point where you failed, or before the point where everything fell apart, whether it's your fault or not, you're still that same person.
Yep.
Before and after. So you still have that potential in you. That's what I keep trying to tell myself. So I still have that potential. I have a worth.
Yep.
We all have a worth.
Yep.
And it's trying to keep a hold of that.
Yeah.
You know.
And do you think you're getting better at that through your experience, or
yes.
Is it a very kind of up and down journey?
It does go up and down, but it's generally trending upwards.
Good.
Having that worth. It's dipped straight down again. I mean, I'm clinging on to this log on this river, and occasionally the waterfall appears.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm able to, avoid it, and then other times, no, it's just straight down. But again, it's a case of, well, still clinging on, still going. It's fine. It's fine. You will make it. So, but a lot of what I find is I try and find things to help keep me going. I try and cling on to things. Maybe it's my same personality where I'm all into a lot of things. I try and find meanings or ways to boost myself up, because I've realized that when things are feeling pretty bad, I can't boost myself. You can't create energy from nowhere.
Yeah.
You've got to have, I feel I need that external trigger, that thing.
Yeah.
And I find it through quotes, through sayings, through songs a lot, to be honest, because music can have a big change on your mood. Yeah. That's definitely one thing, actually, that I'm realizing it now, that music is a really big thing on how you think. It changes your mood. It gives you that chance. Same as when people say, "Oh, when things are bad, just smile." It makes makes things feel better. It's biologically, it will make things feel better. For me, it doesn't work. It makes me feel fake, which triggers the anxiety, which just goes even further. But
that's the point, isn't it? Finding your things that work for you.
Yeah,
right.
But then I find that and catch that and bring it back.
Exactly.
And that's how I cope.
Superb.
That's a lot of how I cope.
Good. Brilliant. Amazing advice. And we've got to wrap up there.
Yes.
But Harrison, a real gem of an interview, that, and really pleased and proud that you come on and shared how you feel, because I know the whole point of these podcasts is to share that lived experience and to give others the opportunity to learn from that stuff. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks.
All right.